Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point, AFR Talk. Let's go right to the phones, 888-589-8840. That Bible stick number, by the way, military Bible stick number is 800-800-2555, 800-800-2555. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Chuck in Kewanee, Mississippi. Chuck, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
I just want to know what can be done if fraud is to have been found in the polls.
Yeah.
What can be done about it? Can we overthrow them if they find fraud, widespread, or what? And I'm going to hang up.
Okay, well, that's a good question. And you got some real voter fraud. Let me see if I can grab the stories. Where are those? Well, for example, tell me there's no voter fraud here. Now, Alan West is asking for a recount in Florida, and the recount gave him some votes, but it looks like he's still going to lose that election. We don't know if there's voter fraud down there. I'd initially seen a story on townhall.com that the voter participation rate in the county where Alan West was standing for re-election was 141.4%. In other words, 141.4% more votes were cast than registered voters. Looked like massive voter fraud. But it turns out that the Florida ballot was so long this year that you had to actually turn in 2 ballots. They couldn't get everything on one ballot, one voter card. So that actually represented about 70%. You cut that in half. That represented about 70% voter participation. But in Philadelphia, listen to this. In 59 voting divisions in the city of Philadelphia, Mitt Romney received not one vote. 0, zilch, nada. Not a single vote in 59 voting divisions. Now, in these big cities, typically 75 to 80% of voters will identify as Democrats, but not 100%. But in these voting divisions, 59 of them, not a single solitary vote went to Mitt Romney, even though 20 to 25% of registered voters, if you project kind of across the city, would not be registered Democrats. So the vote total there, 19,605 to nothing. 19,605 to zip. And I read to you stories on Friday, other places in Philadelphia where you had turnout at 100%. Well, you don't get 100% turnout anywhere. But everybody that they had registered to vote, voted for Obama, voted, and 100% of them voted for Obama. So you cannot tell me that there aren't irregularities. Now, the only way you can check that is to have poll watchers. And by law, each party is allowed to have poll watchers in there to watch what's happening to make sure that there isn't voter fraud. They can hear people getting checked in and announcing their names, and they can do all that kind of stuff to make sure there's no voter fraud. But in some of these polling precincts, especially in Philadelphia, the Republican poll watchers actually got kicked out of the polling place. They were physically forced out. They had to go to a judge who ordered them to be let back in, and an armed sheriff's deputy had to escort them back into the place. So at some point, you have to count on some basic level of integrity for the people that are manning the polling booths. And in Philadelphia, it doesn't look like even that minimum standard was met. And you think about a state like Ohio, a state like Florida, the vote differential, I checked it again this morning, in Ohio was 104,000. Vote differential is 104,000. Now, I'm not saying the same thing happened in Ohio that happened in Philadelphia, but we had some stories from Cleveland. In fact, it might have been Cleveland I was talking about. I think maybe it was Cleveland where you had some districts where 100% turnout and 100% vote for Barack Obama. Now, there's no way somebody didn't monkey with that. That just does not happen. This is the real world here. That's fantasy land. That's Donkey Kong territory where it's just complete make-believe because that just doesn't happen. So you obviously got some kind of irregularity in Cleveland and obviously in Philadelphia. Now, Ohio, 104,000 votes goes the other way. And again, that's just 52,000 votes. You get them to flip, change their vote from Obama to Romney. 52,000 can flip that whole election. So Voter integrity, obviously a great issue. I think this voter ID is critically important. That's why the Obama administration fights these voter ID photo where you got to show some kind of photo ID. I mean, you go to any kind of Democrat state convention this last year, and every one of them, you had to show photo ID. They wouldn't let you in to vote in the Democratic state convention unless you had a photo ID. Couldn't even get in. So they know the importance of photo ID to protect the integrity of their selection process. And so that's going to be key, and that's why the Department of Justice fights them, because they want to preserve the capacity to cheat. Now, I talked with you about what happened with the military votes. Now, I read a story from a blog, which apparently is a satire blog called Duffel Blog. Apparently that's a satire blog, and I sent a correction out about it after somebody alerted me to that. But the facts in that story were still correct. There was a huge problem with getting the military vote processed. There was a whole bag of military votes that was stuck in Bahrain. It had been there since September 30. They went looking for them. Where are they? They found them sitting in some kind of military warehouse in Bahrain, of all places, and they'd been sitting there since September 30. They'd been mailed from Afghanistan September 27. And remember, the Inspector General, the law requires every military installation to have an office that's devoted to help members of the military vote. When the Inspector General called up these military installations, he could not even find half of them. In other words, they didn't even exist at half of the military installations around the country. So we know there was an effort to suppress the military vote, and that had to be coming from the upper chains of command. So bottom line, the number one thing we need to do to deal with voter fraud is photo ID, voter ID. In fact, we found out in Cleveland, in Ohio, you never have to show photo ID at any part of the process. You can even vote without showing any kind of, you don't even have to be registered, and you can vote even if you're not registered. All you have to do is have a utility bill. You don't have to have anything with your picture on it that proves who you are. You can bring a utility bill from somebody else and pretend that you're them, and you get a ballot, and off you go and vote. So photo ID, number one criterion, and then get some kind of integrity at the polling stations, making sure that poll watchers are allowed there. Let's go to Ran in Fredericktown, Maryland. Ran, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian.
Hey.
You just spoke to the point that I was going to make. Right before you signed off Friday, you left us with that with a figure of 600,000 military votes that had been, what I took from your part of the conversation was that they were purposely hidden, that they were purposely held back, and that they would have changed the vote. And that although I was trying to figure out if that was the case, even if it's 600,000 votes, since it's not done by popular vote, I don't know how you would have spread them around through the Electoral College to where that 600,000 would have turned the 6 states that he needed for the election, would have turned them around to give him the election.
Yeah, and I think the story said hundreds of thousands. I don't know if it said 600,000, it said hundreds of thousands, and I suppose that, given the size of our military, that might be possible. That sounds high to me, that there would be that many military votes cast from installations, around the world. And again, like you say, you have no idea where those votes are going, where they're going to be distributed to, so you don't really know how much of an impact it would have had. But military vote, might have had an impact on a state like Florida, where the differential was 47,000. Might have made a difference in a state like Ohio, where the vote differential was only 104,000. Anyway,
Sure.
Finish your thought, Rand.
And I had called my state representative, and she said that it had just come across her desk, the fact that had happened. And I waited all weekend to find out if anything was going to happen about it. But when I didn't hear anything, then I took it that it wasn't that serious. I'd like to add one thing that you had just talked about with the Spanish vote. And, you're talking about 75% of the people, Spanish people, voted on other things other than their religious values, and I think that coincides with the young demographic here in that the people our age were more raised in the church and around the church and have those beliefs about us, whereas the young people coming up now are not involved in the church the way we were, and they're not brought up to have God in their lives from, although you would think the Spanish would, but they're not brought up, I guess, the way we were as kids, and where you're going to church every Sunday and where you're doing Bible study and things like that. And I think that's why these kids nowadays, that they they're not taking so much into consideration when they're voting. They're voting the movie star method rather than to really sit down and take a look at the problems in the world and what they're really facing. I don't think any of them have a clue, and it's bothersome, but it's a fact now, and I think it's whether the and I also agree that we need to have another party, but I agree that whoever either the Republicans or our new party needs to, like it or not, we're going to have to be the movie star crowd too, and we're going to have to go after the future vote in the same way that they're doing, and by popularity rather than by point, because we gave it to them point by point. Romney couldn't have made it any clearer and still got nowhere.
Well, I don't know, Rand, if I agree with that, because what I hear you saying is that the key to winning office is to abandon our principles and try to be popular. But then what's the point if you don't have any principles that you're trying to implement, that you're trying to turn into public policy? What's the point of even having power, just having power for power's sake? I mean, we shouldn't be interested in that.
Brian,
we should only be...
And you're correct, but here, like you said, they're 1% away from us never getting a win again.
Yeah, but Rand, I'm not willing to compromise my principles just for the sake of political office. I don't think anybody should be willing to do that. Now,
I agree with that. I don't want to either, but I don't know any other way we can win.
All right. Well, appreciate the call, Rand. Thank you. Well, the reality is we just need to articulate conservatism. Mitt Romney didn't do that. He doesn't know how to do that. He's not a conservative. He never has been a genuine conservative. It's a second language to him. So he could not speak with any kind of authority about public policy on marriage, about public policy on the sanctity of life, about smaller government, about the rule of law when it comes to immigration. Couldn't speak with any authority because he just wasn't a genuine conservative. So we need to be sure that the folks we have can represent, articulate the conservative message. That'll sell.